All right, it was really tight, but Alabama passes Georgia in the AP rankings by 2 points, which means Georgia had to have been ranked number 3 by at least one person would cause the discrepancy there because the Dogs had 3 more first place votes than Alabama in the AP poll. Well, I go by the AP poll. I mean, I get it there, but does Georgia deserve to have gone backwards? That's the question I've got, and I think that's a bit harsh. We'll see if Alabama will be judged the same way if they struggle in the future. But when they struggled, they got dropped. I mean, they barely survived against Texas, and I believe the next week Georgia was the number one team. So it makes sense. I don't know. I mean, I would say Georgia's had a better season so far than Alabama, just simply because of the wins that Georgia's got, or very specifically the Oregon win. I mean, the Ducks are ranked number 12 in the country. They are the highest ranked one loss team in the country. And there will be some more one loss teams hanging out. There are no two loss teams in the top 25 right now. That will change as well. Arkansas is hanging on, as is Baylor in the coaches poll, but as two loss teams. But look, you know, Bama and Georgia are, to me, a little bit further away from Ohio State than they should be. But Alabama 1,523 points, Georgia 1,521 points, so very close. I don't know if voters will watch the doubleheader on CBS to see on Saturday if they want to juggle some things. This weekend? It's a good question actually, because you're going to see on the same network a back to back where you get a look at both these teams exactly at the same time. Um, but it's getting crowded in the top 10 with the SEC, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama all in the top there. The Big Ten with Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, uh, Oklahoma State and SC are both in there as well. So, um, you know, Alabama did not play. That vote was about Georgia not playing well. That's all there is to it. That wasn't a vote about Alabama playing well against Arkansas, because they didn't. I mean, it was a perfectly adequate game, but they they did. The final score of that game was not indicative of Arkansas and Alabama's fight. It's certainly not in the third quarter. So, but you get credit when you start, thrashing people at the end of games. Um, and the feel good story that is Arkansas is pretty well gone this year after one inexplicable loss to Texas A&M, and then the loss to Alabama. I mean, that's just what it is. But these two teams seem on a collision course for the playoff. Make sure you're picking up DAWGSTRUCTION today, 80 pages. If you want me to sign it for you, I will. It's a great Christmas gift. And no, we're not that far away from Christmas that you don't need to be thinking about it in the holiday season. So pick that up today. It doesn't really matter who is ranked number one right now. Um, all of this, if these two teams do what they're supposed to do, and Alabama has a tougher run, but if these two teams do what they're supposed to do, everything about being number one or two or three, that's all going to be decided in Atlanta. Um, and we'll just have to see. I mean, with SC playing the way they are now, now Clemson has survived against Wake Forest, and they seem to have a lot of mojo after their win over NC State at home. Um, Oklahoma State, looks good too. But we've got a significant way to go here. I mean, you've got three Big Ten East teams in the top 10. You got four SEC teams in the top 10. You've got, Clemson and SC and Oklahoma State make up the others, each one from their particular conference, and that's it. But we've got, it's clear Georgia's a really good team. You know why? Because Georgia beat the absolute brakes off of Oregon, and that matters. I mean, Oregon has beaten BYU. That's BYU's only loss. BYU has beaten Baylor. I mean, you can just take it from there. There has been a fair amount of overreaction this week. Georgia fans love to get their Larry Munson on, and I understand it. I mean, that's what they know. They've always been that way. They feel that it's in their bones. But um, you know, it doesn't mean that it's really necessarily based in reality. When you take a look at predictive spreads in the future, we have a poster who does a really good job, a subscriber on Dog Post, who does a really good job of keeping up with sort of what the future will be, and his predictive spreads are pretty accurate, generally speaking. And of course, there was this notion that Georgia would just fall, like fall apart, and you can see it on the screen here. I'm sorry, it's not really large. I will attempt to make it larger. There we go. You know, and this is exactly what Purple Brave is. I call him Purple. Is what he's talking about here is Georgia predictive spreads week 6. The sky is falling on message boards, but not from odds makers. And he goes on here to predict. These are predictive spreads that the Georgia Auburn line. This is not his predicted. The Georgia Auburn line has gone up almost a touchdown. And I mean, that's a lot. That's a pretty big move. Obviously, you can see Vanderbilt at 38. I think this Florida line will be closer to 21 by the time they play those games. Tennessee is clicking back down towards 10. This is the game that a lot of like sort of smart Georgia fans are watching is Mississippi State. Now, the Bulldogs have issues. They took a loss to LSU that they probably shouldn't have taken. LSU is certainly getting better, but that can be a real tricky game. And then, of course, Kentucky definitely gave a game away against Ole Miss this weekend. That was bad, but I think the Tech game is going to be around 40. I agree with that. So to discuss, should Georgia be the 1 or the 2 or the 3? I mean, I think Ryan and I talked about this on the ride home. Um, After this weekend, I don't know why you wouldn't go with Ohio State at number 1. But and like if you're going to get that picky, but I think part of that is, it's hard to move away from what Georgia's already done. And they've had a lot of real success. The win over Notre Dame for Ohio State, 21-10, that doesn't look nearly as good now as it has. They've allowed some points, although they're scoring like crazy. Ohio State, there's not a lot in their way. The Big Ten has its teams, and that's it. It has probably 2 teams and a half a team in Penn State. We'll see about Penn State. I don't trust a thing they do. I mean, I do not trust a thing Penn State does. So, surviving at Purdue, you know, okay, but like I'll give you one of those. But like the Northwestern, like you can only beat Northwestern by 10. I mean, Northwestern is trash. The European champions. I understand that. And they are in first place in the Big Ten West with 1 win on the season, y'all. I mean, that's unacceptable. So, you lost to Duke, Southern Illinois, Miami of Ohio. I mean, like Northwestern would be in like the bottom of the field in the MAC, and they're in first place in the Big Ten West. What are we doing? What's happening around here? Wisconsin sucks. They fired their coach. Well, anyway, I still expect Georgia, Bama, and Ohio State to be in the playoff. The winner of the SEC championship game, whether they have a loss or not, that team is going to be the number 1 seed as it stands today. Now, if you get to a situation where Ohio State, beats Michigan or Michigan beats Ohio State, maybe, but that last win of 2 teams that are likely collectively win 22 or 20, anywhere from 22 to 24 games in the regular season combined, it's hard to say that team wouldn't have won, wouldn't have really been the best number 1 seed. I mean, so we'll see, but I'm not so sure if Bama or Georgia loses a game and that they get knocked out of the playoff. Obviously, they'll have the opportunity to go on to win the league at that point, but four teams have to get in, y'all. And Clemson has kind of waddled their way through a tough part of their schedule. USC, I could say the same exact thing. This past couple of weeks, we've seen, from week 2 on, we've seen Clemson, Georgia, Bama, and SC all struggle. We've not seen Michigan struggle. We've not necessarily seen Oklahoma State struggle. We've seen Tennessee struggle for sure. We've seen Ole Miss struggle to some degree with Kentucky. They should not have won that game. Penn State won in Purdue late. You're going to have tough games. I mean, it's going to happen. And unless we're y'all, unless we're ready to say Syracuse, UCLA, Kansas are the best teams in the country because they're undefeated and they've kind of gotten around the teams they've played, then you're going to have blemishes on your schedule. It's going to happen, and this is not to make mistake, not to make excuses for Georgia, but you know, you know, UCLA beat South Alabama by a point. That at home. I mean, if that matters, you look at Kansas. This is pretty solid from Kansas, but they got a 3-point win against Iowa State at home. I mean, is Iowa State good? I don't think they're bad, but they're in last place with Oklahoma in their league, so that's not ideal. Now they played two really good teams, so I think Iowa State still could be okay. And you look at Syracuse, you know, slightly beating Purdue by 3, which is all Penn State did, and then hanging on against Virginia to win by 2, and you see Syracuse is undefeated 5-0 with Clemson. I mean, it's amazing. They're going to eat some losses, Syracuse, along the way, you would imagine, but um, we are a long way from where we need to be. I do think that it's rational to say that Georgia should not be number 1. I also think if you want to say they should be, I get that too. They shouldn't be number 4.